Hello everybody, I am the White Angel and I am a conservative. So I'm going to start recording these videos later because there's a lot of glare from my window and I got Wi-Fi working on my computer. So now I can post stuff via my computer. I'll have to get my figure out my BitChute password. But now we're going to talk today about traditional masculinity. Yeah, masculine man. Yeah. But no, all joking aside, it's important to note how important masculinity was in human civilization, for civilization, for literal centuries, and why it was necessary for men and women to have specific roles. First of all, psychologically speaking, we're not even wired the same way. We're very different creatures, psychologically. The psychic makeup of a man versus the psychic makeup of a woman. Two different worlds. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. It's classic. It's very true. When it comes right down to it, ideas of traditional masculinity in Western civilization, of the models of masculinity of which I am ultimately familiar, I'm going to talk about a few of those before I trip over my own tongue. Now, the Old Norse model of masculinity was a fairly interesting thing. Most people think of the Old Norse masculinity as being a Viking. Ooh, I'm going to split your skull and drink your blood. No, man. That whole image of the Old Norse and the Vikings is based almost entirely on the invasion of 1066. We got one glimpse at their society, and we base our whole idea on that. It's ridiculous. No. Based on concepts of anthropology and various other things, we found that the idea of masculinity for the Old Norse, if you want to understand what that looks like in a modern context, think Red-Green. From the Canadian comedy show, The Red-Green Show. It's a sitcom about a fraternal order. The leader of this order, a guy named Red-Green, he's a tool nut. He's a handy man. He likes working with his hands. He's getting down and dirty with all the tools and stuff. And poking fun at people from the big city. This is essentially what the Old Norse thought of a man being. He works outside with his hands. He has tools. He may have a tool belt. When he goes out looking for a job, he may go looking for a job with a tool belt around his waist. Just as a display of, hey, I've got tools. I know how to use these tools. Hire me. This was very much the ideal. Your basic handyman was the masculinity of the Old Norse. Plain and simple. He was a hard worker, worked outside. He fixed all the things in town if he could. And he got a certain joy and satisfaction out of the deal. Because not all Old Norsemen were Vikings. Many stayed home. Then we're talking about, of course, about the medieval English ideas of masculinity. Surprisingly quite similar, actually. Medieval English ideas of masculinity, although the difference here will be there is a separation of class, for example. Lower working class men, the idea of masculinity was quite very much like that Old Norse model. Quite similar, except, of course, they didn't believe in Norse gods. They would have believed in the Christian God. So suffice to say, otherwise very much similar. The only thing that would really be different would be the manner of dress and, being the master of the house. Because on the Old Norse society, the woman was the master of the house. The man worked outside, she worked inside. And she would carry a ring of keys around her waist as a signifier of that she was the master of the house. She decided who slept there. She decided where her husband slept. She decided what rooms went to which kid. Like, she was the absolute master of the home. But in the early post-Christian era, that was a big no-no. Women were subservient. Thou shalt not suffer a woman to teach, and so forth. The man became the master of the home, and he also prayed a lot. He directed family prayer. He was in control of everything, both the inside of the house and outside of the house. And when he was gone, the woman took charge. It was similar but more sexist in the general sense of not letting the woman have her fair share of the responsibility, making her like a second child almost. But that was very similar. The upper class medieval English ideas of masculinity surprisingly would be seen as feminine today. The upper class would have grown out their hair to about shoulder length, mostly as a display of saying, hey, I can afford to keep my scalp lice-free. I have no disease. Ha ha, filthy peasant. They weren't workers. The upper class men were not workers. They were community leaders, mayors, burgermeisters for the Germans, like you name it. Often kings. They made decisions, but they did not work. So very different. We're talking about a more political kind of masculinity. Strong orator. So think Cicero. The ancient Roman orator Cicero, for example, would have been like a medieval English concept of a masculine man. Very much so. And then we get to the more traditional American idea of masculinity. Here you want to think a mix of like that red-green ideal of the handyman, the tool man, the worker, but also weirdly mixed with an added element of Henry Ford. The masculine man, he smiles. He works with the people. He's innovative. He comes up with ideas and he drafts them and he brainstorms. He's pointing to a blackboard or to a whiteboard or doing this. It's like, I got an idea, boys. Like even the common worker, who's still a tool guy, but he's like, I got an idea, boys. Like suddenly, the masculine man in America is this wannabe genius who thinks he's smarter than he really is. That may be a dumb model of masculinity, but that was American masculinity for a long time. Now, I'm here to also talk about the relationship between men and athleticism and the sort of deep satisfaction we get out of using our bodies. We are creatures of the flesh, very much so. Like, on some level, even the nerds like to punch things, to kick things, to sometimes occasionally maybe be a little bit of an asshole, Well, we enjoy our physical dominance. That's what being a man is sometimes. But we have this relationship with athleticism. We like working with our bodies, working with our hands, getting shit done, sweating. Like, this is the natural order of things. These skinny little toothpick soy boys who can barely pick up a tool. These are not real men. Biologically, yes, but mentally, spiritually, absolutely not. These are not men at all. But they're not exactly boys, because even boys can be more masculine than them. No, these are basically like pseudo-women, almost. It's pretty absurd. They are not athletic. They are not independent. They do not have tools. They do not work. They do not think. They're basically like cliche gay men who just happen to like women. I hate to put it that way, but that's the truth. There's a bug in my face. Now you have to understand also the difference between machismo and masculinity. And there is a difference. And I'm mostly going to explain what that is. Now, the origin of the term macho or machismo comes from a fad or a trend that was popular in the Latin world. among Latinos, of trying to look more and more masculine, more or less as a response to the more pretty boy type Latinos who got women by looking more, I'm beautiful, come sleep with me. This is more of a, hey, look at me, I'm much more male, you know? But that is not, generally speaking, true masculinity. No. What masculinity ultimately is, it is something that is sort of socially derived. It is not a construct, but it is derived from nature. It is a little bit nature, it is a little bit nurture, but a lot bit nature. It is deeply satisfying for a man to be physical and work with his hands. It just feels right, you know? Just wanting to get physical with your tools and do things and maybe punch a guy in the face, yeah. But machismo, displaying of muscles, bodybuilding, this is not masculinity. This is more or less a trend from the Latin world that is actually fairly homoerotic. Because what men didn't realize, and this is true about men and women both, is that we have this tendency to think we understand the opposite sex better than they understand themselves. Which is an attitude that we just need to stop wholesale. Women need to stop acting like they think they know men better than men do, and vice versa. Like, cut that shit out. It is so fucking dumb. Like, you don't know shit. Alright? You know who understands women? Women. You know who understands men? Men. Alright? See, the thing is, we assume that women are like us. We are attracted to the body. Our romantic and sexual attraction is almost entirely visual. For romantic attraction, we think smiles, warm, funny, loving, perhaps somewhat matronly, maybe even a little exotic, but that's all visual. And we think, oh, well, that's how it is for us, it must be that way for women too, right? Right? And sure, sometimes women talk about physical appearance, but in many cases, their priority is clearly someplace else. They are not men. They work different. But machismo assumes that, women are attracted to the visual like men are. This ultimately creates this kind of very homoerotic kind of thing, You're not going to appeal to women with your bulging muscles. You're actually going to appeal to other men with your bulging muscles. It's actually very, very gay. It sickens me to some extent of how much our modern concept of masculinity has been infected with machismo. That we have to be these big, oily, muscly, Conan the Barbarian, who actually is really, really gay. A lot of gay dudes are actually really attracted to big, muscly bodies. So, this is a huge difference. But to simplify the concept, macho is appealing to the visual, to visual stimuli, whereas masculinity is just doing what your male nature inclines you to do naturally. And you're just taking it and, with those models previously discussed of the Old Norse, Medieval English, and American ideas of masculinity, those are just taking nature and turning them into a kind of social science almost. Just taking it down to an art form. But it is derived of something that is nature rather than nurture. And you can nurture nature, absolutely. You can nurture it and advance it, you can feed it, you can water it, and before you know it, it'll grow into something greater and greater. And to some extent, this machismo, this machoism, may be partly involved with the male suicide rate, which is pretty high. Now, the thing is, the machismo holds this idea that, Men don't openly display their emotions. Boys don't cry. Don't cry. Don't cry. That makes you weak. When the opposite is true. Not showing your emotions makes you fucking weak. If you have a feeling and you feel like doing something, then just fucking do it. Express the emotion. It may not necessarily seem right to you because of maybe how you were raised, but that is a healthy, natural human behavior. Excuse me. Machoism is not natural or healthy. That may be one contributor to the male suicide rate. Another contributor is sometimes just the hardships of being a man. The realization that, in society, women are more valuable because they have the ability to reproduce. Men are disposable. Women could totally be out there going about their business and then see men literally die and be like, oh, that's okay, I've got more of those things at home. Women could have that attitude and still have a functional society. I'm not even kidding. Because a woman can sleep with as long as she's not directly related to a man, can sleep with tons and tons of men and have tons and tons of kids. She can reproduce tons of times. She can replace her man physically. In the sexual marketplace, the woman is of higher value automatically, while she's young and healthy, that is. If she's not still young and healthy, then she's not going to have the same degree of success. But during her grace period, she is it. She is the queen. She does have more of those things at home. But modern machoism may have an effect on the male suicide rate. It is a very real problem and one that needs to be addressed. And I don't have many ideas on that, but one idea I always had was maybe sort of eliminating the social stigma surrounding, oh, you need therapy? How embarrassing. No, dude, there's nothing wrong with therapy. There's nothing embarrassing about therapy. It's okay to not be okay. We all need a little therapy every now and again. And I recommend actually that people learn a little basic psychology to serve as a kind of first aid for the mind. You do it for the body, why not for the mind? Why not learn to manage your emotional things and your stress? And if you don't have the means to do that, you can always, if it's a little more than that sort of psychological first aid can handle, then you can go to a therapist, and we need to remove that stigma. It's okay to not be okay. So if you're having suicidal thoughts and actions, and I've had suicidal thoughts before, I've even had some suicidal actions, and I'm still here. I didn't have to go to a therapist. Of course, I'm a rare case. I'm still alive because I got mad at myself. And mad at the people who hurt me. So, my temper saved my life. Amazing. That's not going to work for everybody. Hell no. Sorry, that's my phone. Suffice to say that this kind of psychological first aid is, de-stress yourself every now and again. Find something, some activity you can do at home that makes you relax, and do it until you feel okay. And once you feel like you're relaxed and you're ready, you can go back out into the world and handle all the slings and arrows again. There's nothing wrong with taking a brief sanctuary. Learn basic common mental illnesses, where they come from, and how to deal with them. Read some books, read some Carl Jung, study some other stuff, do some thought experiments, build up an understanding of basic everyday mental stresses and mental triggers, and just learn to manage them. They should put that shit in schools. We should be teaching that to children. It's like, okay, kids, today we're going to teach you how to manage stress. We'll create a class in school. We'll call it Life Skills. We'll call it Life Skills 101. You're going to learn how to manage stress. You're going to learn how to manage basic everyday mental illnesses and stressors. You're going to learn how to cook, clean. You're going to learn how to frickin' budget. Learn how to budget money. Like, just basic life skills and make, like, a big, like, life 101. I think that'd be a great idea. Sounds awesome, right? Boom. But, when it comes right down to it, for our final topic here, it's just that there's really are two kinds of men in the world. I think is the final understanding we need to have, is that there's two kinds of men in the world. And that is thinkers and doers. That is the men who like to do things and the men who like to think things. One man works with physical material, one man works with actions and one man works with ideas. There you go. This has been encapsulated quite nicely in history as the nerds versus the jocks. And I like to think of the whole alpha versus beta thing as the new nerd versus jock. It's been reincarnated. Because if you look at the image of the beta male on Google, what do you see? You see neck, beard, and glasses, and things that 20 years ago would have been said, oh, that's a nerd. It's the same fucking thing. It's just the new jocks versus nerds. It's been reincarnated. It found a new form. It's motherfucking Frieza. It's got more forms than Majin Buu. But for the jock, he's an athlete. He's physical. He's all about action. He doesn't like talk. He just wants to get shit done. The nerd is all about ideas. He wants to brainstorm grand solutions, come up with new ideas, create a new science, create a theory. This is still very masculine. It's just you're working with a different substance. You're not much of a thinker. Not much of a doer. You're a thinker. You think about things, ideas, places, names. And a lot of the times, the jocks are going to end up working for you as your employee, because you need people to be the physical doers to carry out your idea with action. And if you can't take the actions, well, hire a doer, hire a jock. Make him respect you. It's all about the male dominance, yeah. Make him respect you. Do something he'll respect you for, and maybe he'll listen. But generally speaking, yeah, that's masculinity in a nutshell. We work with our hands and we do things. We make things. We build society. We are the societal builders. Like, who built this webcam? Probably men. Could be slave labor from China, but that's another topic for another time. But most of the things built in our society were built by men. Because that's just what we do. We build things. And the difference between the jock and the nerd is the jock oftentimes builds objects, and the nerd often just builds ideas. And the ideas are no less important for society, because where do you think those objects, the physical guys, built? Where do you think those objects came from? They came from ideas. One might say that a man working with that little two-pronged stylus, working out a blueprint for a building, you could say that man, in a sense, is a nerd. He's working with his brain instead of his hands. You know what I'm saying? So when it comes right down to it, that's just what men do. They build things. They go out, they hunt, they gather, and they build stuff. And that's what masculinity is and should be. The hunter-gatherer who builds stuff. They build ideas, they build objects, they build institutions. We create. We create, and women maintain what we create for us. Historically speaking, that's what women have done. They've maintained what men create. And they're historically been very good at that. They also historically have provided men with great shelters from stress. There's no greater shelter from stress for a man than a good woman. She can shelter him from his pain, his stress, and everything. He goes to his sister or his mother or somebody when he needs a break from all his building, and once he's ready, he can go out and do it all over again. You know, it's an endless cycle of build, break, build, break. You know, take a lunch, take a nap. Anyway, there will be a link below in the description to my books that I've written, that I've been uploading on Kobo. I currently have a short story and a novella. It'll be the first episode of an episodic novella. It's kind of an experiment. It's called The Human Saga. It's basically what happens when you try to write a cyberpunk story, but in the narrative style of a traditional science fiction. So it's like if Gene Roddenberry tried to write cyberpunk, but came with a cyberpunk setting, but came at it from a more traditional mindset. It's quite interesting. It's the first episode. There's going to be as many. I may plan as many as 14 different episodes, possibly. I don't know how many I'm going to do. Then I got my short story, which is called The Mortician's Daughter, so please look up my books. Please buy and download and read them. Anyway, welcome to the Reformation.